What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to revisit the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G and go over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy in late 2022. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. Now, the first thing about this phone I kind of want to go over is the general availability. Now, you can get this phone factory unlocked for a pretty decent price. In fact, for that matter, I see it all the time on stuff like eBay, for example. So in general, it's really not that hard to come by. That being said though, when it comes to US carriers, I haven't actually seen it being offered by anyone. So just keep in mind, although in general, I would consider this phone to be pretty affordable if you get it factory unlocked, since to my knowledge, it's not being offered by any US carriers. You're not going to find any crazy carrier deals for it, like you might with, say, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. But that being said, again, you can get this phone factory unlocked, usually for somewhere around $300. So in general, for what it is, I still would consider it decently affordable. Now with the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G, we're getting a 6.4-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 411, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 83.7% screen to body ratio. So in general, this phone does have a really good display. At 6.4 inches, while not being the largest out there, it is still at least large enough to be comfortable to use for a longer period of time. So if you're going to be on your phone a lot, maybe you're watching videos for example, or doing something more basic like browsing the web, no matter what you're doing on this phone, again, it is at least large enough to give you a decent experience. With an aspect ratio of 20:9, we're getting a taller and more narrow form factor here. So if you're doing something in landscape mode, like maybe watching a video or playing a game, you're going to get a more immersive experience. And for vertical things like browsing the web, reading, using social media, stuff like that, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So definitely nice that we're getting this kind of form factor. And then of course, the image quality is great as well. With the 1080p resolution, things are going to be nice and sharp. And the Super AMOLED is giving us nice vibrant colors, good brightness, and good viewing angles. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, this phone is going to be a lot easier to see than something like an LCD. And if that wasn't enough, with a 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. So if you're doing something like watching videos, playing games, or even just using the phone in general, things are going to feel nicer and more fluid. And overall, the phone is just going to feel a little bit more premium to use. So in general, if you're looking for a more affordable phone that has a really nice display for consuming content, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G is going to be a great choice. Now for storage, this phone is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, but keep in mind, there is another variant out there that has 256GB. But in my experience, this version that has 128GB is a little bit more common. That being said though, either way, for what it is, it definitely has a great amount of storage. So if you're maybe a little bit more of a power user, if you're downloading a bunch of apps, especially stuff like games that take up a little bit more space, or maybe you're taking lots of photos and recording lots of videos, no matter what you're doing on your phone, if you are looking for something with a little bit more storage, the A33 5G is going to be a good choice, especially considering, again, this phone does have microSD card expansion. So if you want to offload stuff like photos and videos, for example, you always can. Now for security features, this phone does have Face Unlock, as well as a nice looking in-display fingerprint scanner. So let's go ahead and give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, this phone does have Face Unlock too, so it's always nice to get both options besides a pin to unlock it. Now taking a look at the camera setup here. For the selfie camera, we got a water drop notch. Not nearly as nice looking as a hole punch in my opinion, but in general, it doesn't really look too bad. Now this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. So in general, as far as features go, for a mid-range phone like this, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G has really everything. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, this is going to be a pretty good phone for you. And the photo quality itself, while maybe not being quite as good as a $1,400 flagship phone, for example, is still really good for a more affordable device. So if you're taking pictures, maybe to share on social media, for example, and you want things to look really nice, but at the same time, you don't need the absolute top of the line quality, I would say this phone will get the job done for most people. And also keep in mind that even if you do have an insanely powerful camera, for stuff like social media, those platforms are going to compress the images anyway. So again, just keep in mind, for almost everyone, unless you're really doing professional mobile photography or something like that, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G and phones like this are really going to be plenty good enough. In addition to this, when it comes to video, this phone has a max recording quality of 4K in both the rear and front cameras. So if you are recording a lot of videos and you want to be able to record in 4K, then this phone is definitely going to be a great affordable option. And compared to the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, which you can typically find in a US carrier for around the same price, that phone can't record in 4K. So being able to record 4K videos is definitely one reason to get this phone over the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. Now as far as RAM and processor go, this phone is getting 6GB of RAM with the Samsung Exynos 1280 processor. When When it comes to overall performance, I would say this is generally a pretty fast phone if you're doing more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, and even a little bit of mobile gaming here and there. In general, in my experience, this phone has been really fast for what it is. That being said though, if you're really more of a heavy user, if you're doing more high performance mobile gaming for example, or you're just really going to be on your phone 24/7, then keep in mind, while this phone is fast for what it is, this is still not a flagship phone by any means. So overall, if you get a device like this, and you're expecting it to be anywhere near as fast as something like an iPhone for example, you are going to be disappointed because again, while this phone is decent for what it is, and especially great for basic activities like web browsing and social media, I still would definitely not consider it a high performance device, so definitely keep this in mind. Now that being said, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and here are the scores I got. What I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be an upgrade for you. In general though, I would say if you're coming from an older mid-range phone, or maybe a lower end phone, chances are it is going to be a solid upgrade. But if you're coming from maybe an older flagship phone like a Samsung Galaxy S10 for example, then just keep in mind, while like I've been saying, this phone is fast for what it is, it's still not going to be at that level. So if you are in that situation, you might want to consider spending a little bit more to get something a bit higher end. Now for the battery, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G is getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25-watt fast charging. So like pretty much every A series phone this year, this is a great battery. With such a large battery, you can expect to get great battery life and longevity. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you need something that's really going to last all day, this phone is going to be a great choice for you. And with 25-watt fast charging, the charging speeds on this phone are great as well. But keep in mind, in order to actually take advantage of this fast charging, you are going to need a 25-watt fast charger. And in case you don't have one, I will be linking to my favorite fast charger in the video description. So if you need one, definitely check that out. But in general, again, I would say if the battery is really a priority for you for this price range, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G is going to be one of your best options. Now this phone does have Android 12, and it is going to be getting Android 13 pretty soon. And in addition to this, with Samsung software support, you can expect to get several major updates as well. So if having the latest version of Android is important to you, then for the money, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G is going to be a great choice. In addition to this phone also does have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind, you can do that with this phone. Now another thing about the design I do want to point out here is that unfortunately, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G does not have a headphone jack. So if you have a pair of 3.5mm headphones you want to use, then keep in mind, unfortunately, with this phone, you will need an adapter. So in conclusion, is the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G still worth buying in late 2022? Now honestly, it really depends. On one hand, if you're in the US, there are several phones you can get through US carriers that you can typically find some really good deals on that are either almost as good as this phone or a little bit better. For example, if you're just looking for a mid-range phone with a nice display, decent performance, and a good camera, keep in mind, although this phone is a pretty good option and still is pretty affordable, from a US carrier, you'll probably be able to get the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G for a little bit less, if not significantly less depending on the deals. And in general, while this phone is still a little bit better than the A23 5G, it's really not by much. So if you're saving a lot of money by getting the A23 5G, I would honestly just go with that. On the other hand, if you do want to be able to record 4K videos, for example, and maybe you really like the AMOLED display through a US carrier, you can probably get the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G for around the same price as this phone, if not even a little bit less. So again, if those deals are going on at the time you're watching this, if you want something around this level, I would probably just go with the A23 5G. And if you want something a little bit better than that, maybe go for the A53 5G instead. Because again, as far as I know, this phone is not officially being sold by any US carriers. So even though getting it factory unlocked is definitely an option, and it is still really affordable and provides quite a bit of value for the money, in my opinion, the A23 5G and A53 5G, with the deals carriers are offering, are still honestly just better deals. But that being said, if you do happen to get the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G, just keep in mind, this is still a great phone, and honestly, carrier deals aside, with everything at full price, I still do think this phone provides a good amount of value for the money. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.